The wind howled like a wild animal across the frozen wasteland of Frostholm. Jake Moss stood by his window, watching thick snow slam against the reinforced glass. This wasn't just any snowstorm. This was the kind of weather that could freeze a man solid in less than 10 minutes. Jake had seen worse things though. 5 brutal years fighting in the Kelvin War had shown him horrors that made blizzards look like child's play. But that was behind him now. Out here on the edge of civilization he lived alone, and that's exactly how he wanted it. A sharp beep cut through the howling wind. His perimeter alarm was going off. Jake's eyes narrowed as he looked at the security display. 3 large shapes were moving through the white storm, heading straight for his home. That didn't make sense. Nothing alive should be out there right now. Not in this weather. Jake grabbed his rifle from the wall mount. His hands moved with practiced ease, checking the weapon the way soldiers do even years after leaving the military. He pulled up the external camera feeds on his monitor. Through the swirling curtain of snow, he could barely make out 3 massive figures stumbling forward. His heart rate jumped. Drakvan. The dragon-like aliens were unmistakable even through the storm. They stood close to 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in thick scales and built like living weapons. Jake's finger moved closer to the trigger. He'd seen plenty of Drakvan during the war. Too many. They were the kind of enemy that haunted your dreams afterward. He'd watched them tear through human defensive positions with plasma weapons hot enough to melt steel and claws sharp enough to cut through armor plating. But something was wrong. These Drakvan weren't charging forward to attack. They were barely walking at all. They looked like they were dying. Jake leaned closer to the monitor, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The Drakvan scales, which should have been bright red and gold, had turned a 6 shade of black. Ice was forming all over their bodies, covering their arms and legs like a disease. The biggest one, obviously their leader, suddenly dropped to his knees in the deep snow. Behind him, a much smaller Drakvan, probably just a kid, lay completely still in the frozen ground. Every instinct Jake had developed during the war started screaming at him. These were Drakvan. The enemy. The same species that had killed thousands of human soldiers. The same warriors who had wiped out half his unit in a single bloody battle. Men and women he trained with, fought beside, called friends. All dead because of Drakvan. Then the leader lifted his massive head. His alien eyes found Jake's camera, as if he knew someone was watching. When he spoke, his voice was rough and broken, struggling with human words. Please, we beg shelter. Our young, dying. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the chest. In all his years fighting Drakvan, he'd never heard one beg for anything. They were warriors, proud to the point of arrogance. They would rather die in battle than show any sign of weakness. They never surrendered. They never asked for help. They certainly never begged. Yet here was a Drakvan leader, down on his knees in the freezing snow, with what looked like his family dying around him. And he was begging a human, someone from the species they'd fought a brutal war against, for mercy. Jake looked at the small Drakvan, the young one. His chest was barely moving. Maybe one breath every 10 seconds. It was dying right there in front of his home. Damn it all, Jake said under his breath. His hand hit the door release button hard. The exterior door began to slide open. Get inside. Right now. The Drakvan leader struggled to his feet, his movements slow and clumsy from the cold. He picked up the unconscious young one, cradling the small body against his chest. The female Drakvan tried to stand but fell forward. She was shaking so hard her scales were rattling. Together, they stumbled toward Jake's door like refugees fleeing a war zone. Jake stepped back as they entered. The blast of frozen air that came with them felt like knives against his skin. The Drakvan leader carried the juvenile carefully, moving with the kind of gentleness you don't expect from 8-foot-tall reptilian warriors. The female collapsed the moment she got inside, her body hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Furnace room, Jake ordered, pointing down the hallway. His voice had that command tone from his military days. It's the warmest place in the building. Move now. The Drakvan shuffled past him, their clawed feet scraping against his metal floor. They left wet trails of melting ice and snow behind them. Jake noticed their scales were starting to turn from black back to dark red in some places, but they still looked half dead. The leader stopped beside Jake. This close, Jake could smell something like hot metal and smoke coming from the alien. The Drakvan's eyes, golden and slitted like a snake's, met Jake's human ones. There was something in that gaze. Shame maybe. Or surprise. Or gratitude. Jake couldn't tell. Your kind should have left us to die, the Drakvan said quietly, his deep voice rumbling. We would have done so to you. Jake didn't say anything. What could he say? The Drakvan was probably right. If their positions had been reversed, If human soldiers had shown up freezing at a Drakvan door during the war, they probably would have been killed on sight. That's just how war worked. Jake hit the button to seal the exterior door. The howling wind cut off abruptly as the thick metal slid shut. The sudden silence felt almost as loud as the storm had been. He stood there for a moment, his rifle still in his hands, watching 3 former enemies shuffle deeper into his home. He had no idea what he'd just done. No clue if this was the stupidest decision of his life or something else entirely. All he knew was that he'd just invited aliens who'd once tried to kill people like him into his house. Aliens who were dying from cold in ways that shouldn't even be possible. Jake looked at the sealed door, then at the trail of ice water leading to his furnace room. Whatever happened next, his quiet life alone on Frostholm had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. Jake moved quickly through his homestead, cranking every heating unit to maximum power. The temperature gauges climbed rapidly as he pushed his systems harder than they were designed to run. In the maintenance bay, the 3 Drakvan huddled close to his industrial furnace, the kind of heavy-duty heater meant for keeping machinery from freezing. Slowly, painfully slowly, their scales began shifting from that deathly black color back toward their natural crimson and gold. But the young one, the juvenile they kept calling Kevin or something that sounded like it in their growling language, still lay motionless on the cold metal floor. Jake knelt beside the small Drakvan with his medical scanner, the same battlefield equipment he'd carried during the war. The device beeped as it analyzed alien biology it was never designed to read. "This doesn't make any sense," Jake said, more to himself than to them. "How is this even possible? I watched your soldiers march through plasma storms during the war. I saw Drakvan warriors walk straight through firebombing runs that turned human troops to ash. The heat didn't even slow you down. And now you're dying from simple cold?" The leader, who'd told Jake his name was Victor, sat against the wall watching him work. The big Drakvan's expression was hard to read on his alien features, but Jake thought he saw something like shame mixed with confusion. "We did not know this about ourselves," Victor said, his human words coming easier now that he was warming up. "My people have always avoided cold worlds. For thousands of years, we simply never settled on planets like this one. There was never any reason to discover this weakness." Jake pulled out thermal blankets from his military surplus storage, the same kind that had saved human lives on ice worlds during the war. He wrapped them carefully around the juvenile's small body. "That still doesn't add up," he insisted. "If you're a spacefaring species that travels between stars, your biology should have adapted. Space itself is cold. How do you even survive in ships?" The female Drakvan, Rachel, spoke up for the first time since they'd come inside. Her voice was weak and raspy, but the words came through clear enough. "Because we were not born through natural evolution. We were created, built, manufactured." Jake's hand stopped moving. He looked up at her. "What do you mean built?" Victor's large head nodded slowly, his golden eyes reflecting the furnace light. "There was an ancient race, long extinct now. We do not even know their true name anymore. They created the Drakvan to be living weapons. Perfect soldiers. Warriors who could survive in the worst combat environments imaginable. They made us to withstand heat that would melt metal. To breathe air so toxic it would kill most life forms. To heal from wounds that would be fatal to others. They made you into biological war machines," Jake said quietly, understanding dawning. "Yes," Rachel confirmed. "But they were clever, these ancient ones. They built a weakness into us. A hidden failsafe that we never knew existed. We can survive almost anything hot. Plasma, fire, radiation, volcanic worlds. But cold stops us completely. It shuts down our bodies like flipping a switch. This way we could never escape from the warm prison worlds where they kept us. Until you rebelled," Jake guessed. "Until you broke free and killed them." Victor's expression darkened. "We overthrew our creators many generations ago. We thought we had truly become free. We spread across the galaxy, building our own civilization, our own empire. But we only ever claimed warm worlds. Hot planets, desert moons, volcanic systems. We thought it was just preference, just choosing environments that felt comfortable. We never realized it was survival. We never knew that cold worlds would kill us." Jake checked his scanner again. The juvenile's core temperature was climbing, but so slowly it was almost imperceptible. At this rate it would take hours to get him stable. "So your ship crashed here during what, exploration?" "Mineral survey," Rachel explained, her voice getting a bit stronger as the warmth seeped back into her body. "We detected valuable ore deposits in the mountains north of here. Our ship landed to investigate. The weather report showed mild temperatures, well within safe ranges. But a storm system moved in faster than predicted. The cold hit us all at once. We tried to get back to the ship, but our bodies started shutting down. We could barely move. We were freezing to death just trying to walk a few hundred meters. Jake's military mind kicked into gear, running through everything he'd learned about cold weather survival. He'd done Arctic training on Hell 4, one of the worst ice moons in human space. His unit had operated in temperatures cold enough to freeze exposed skin in seconds. The medical protocols came back to him now. "I need to warm you from the inside out," he said, already moving toward his emergency medical supplies. "External heat helps, but it's not enough. I'll need to get heated fluids into your system. Thermal wraps to prevent heat loss. And I have to raise your temperature gradually. Too fast and your tissues will rupture from the expansion." Victor watched Jake gather equipment and prepare 4 lines. "Why are you doing this?" the Drakvan leader asked suddenly. "Why help us at all?" Jake didn't look up from his work. "Because you'll die if I don't." "That is not an answer," Victor pressed. "I led Drakvan warriors on Kelva Prime. I commanded troops during the assault on the human 4th Battalion positions. I remember that battle clearly. Your people fought with great courage. Many died." Jake's hands went completely still. 4th Battalion. His battalion. The battle that had killed 80% of his unit in a single blood-soaked day. The fight where he'd lost friends whose names still haunted his dreams. Bobby, who'd saved Jake's life twice. Jennifer, who'd talked about opening a restaurant after the war. Danny, who'd been 3 weeks from going home to meet his newborn daughter. All dead because of Drakvan warriors. Possibly because of Victor himself. The young Drakvan, Kevin, made a soft groaning sound. His small body shifted slightly under the thermal blankets. The noise pulled Jake back from the dark memories threatening to overwhelm him. "Because," Jake said quietly, forcing his hands to continue setting up the medical equipment, "out here the war is over. Out here we're not soldiers anymore. Out here there's just people dying in the cold and I'm someone who knows how to help them." He inserted the 4-line carefully into a vein on Kevin's arm, working from memory and instinct since he'd never treated alien biology before. The heated saline solution began dripping into the juvenile system. Within minutes, Kevin's breathing became steadier, stronger. The death rattle sound faded from his chest. Victor stared at Jake in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something that might have been respect. "You are different than I expected humans to be." Before Jake could figure out how to respond to that, a loud alarm shattered the quiet moment. His emergency transponder lit up, displaying an automated message in bright red letters. "Human rescue team inbound. Estimated arrival, 20 minutes." Jake felt his stomach drop like a stone. If human authorities found Drakvan here in his home, everything would explode. The peace treaty between their species was only 2 years old, still fragile, still untested. There would be investigations. Accusations of harboring enemy aliens. Questions about why he hadn't reported them immediately. Some people would call it treason. The whole thing could spiral into renewed conflict. Victor saw the look on Jake's face. The Drakvan leader's hand moved slowly toward the plasma blade hanging at his hip. The weapon hummed with barely contained energy. "Don't even think about it," Jake snapped, his voice sharp with command authority. "If your people discover us here," Victor began. "I said I'm thinking," Jake interrupted. He looked at the unconscious Kevin, still fighting for life. Then at Victor and Rachel, former enemies who were now dying refugees in his home. A decision that could change everything balanced on the edge of a knife. And he had less than 20 minutes to figure out what the hell he was going to do about it. The words came out of Jake's mouth before he'd fully thought them through. "There's a shelter. Underground, built into the foundation of this place. It's shielded with lead and concrete. Their scanners won't pick up anything down there." Victor's golden eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why would you hide us from your own people?" "Because I'm not finished treating your kid yet," Jake shot back, his voice hard. "And because I don't feel like spending the next 6 months explaining to my government why I stood by and watched refugees freeze to death on my doorstep. Now move your tail unless you want to find out whether my people are as generous and forgiving as I'm being right now." Rachel tried to push herself up from where she'd been resting against the wall. Her scales still looked dull, not fully recovered. "We cannot simply hide. Our honor as warriors demands." "Your honor won't do a damn thing to keep that young one breathing," Jake cut her off. He pointed at Kevin, still unconscious on the heated cot. "Victor, you want him to live through the next hour? Then you need to trust me and get your people below ground. Right now." The Drakvan leader looked at Jake for what felt like a full minute. Something passed between them in that stare, some understanding that went beyond words. Finally Victor gave a single sharp nod. "We go." Jake led them to a hidden panel in the floor of his storage room. The ladder down was steep and narrow, built for humans, not 8-foot-tall reptilian aliens. Victor went first, cradling Kevin carefully in his massive arms like the young one was made of glass. Rachel followed, moving slowly, still weak from the cold exposure. The underground shelter was small but well-equipped. Jake had built it himself over the course of 2 years, preparing for the kind of emergencies that could happen on a frontier world. Reinforced walls, independent power supply, food and water for months. He'd never imagined he'd be using it to hide alien refugees from human authorities. He settled Kevin onto one of the heated cots and quickly showed Victor how to read the medical monitors. His vitals are stabilizing, but he's not out of danger yet. Keep him warm. Keep him calm. And whatever you do, don't turn on any powered equipment beyond these monitors. Anything with a significant energy signature will show up on their scans, shielded or not. And if his condition worsens? Victor asked, his clawed hand hovering protectively over the juvenile. Jake hesitated. Then you do whatever you can to keep him breathing until I can get back down here. Just keep him alive. And if you do not return at all? Victor's voice was quiet, but the question hung heavy in the recycled air of the shelter. Jake met his eyes. Then you're on your own. Wait until dark, then head for Sector 7. There's a neutral trading station there, run by independent traders who don't ask too many questions. Tell them Jake Moss sent you. Maybe they'll help. Maybe they won't. But it's your best shot. He turned to climb back up the ladder, then stopped with one hand on the rungs. Don't make me regret this decision, Victor. The Drakvan leader's expression was unreadable. I will not. Jake sealed the shelter entrance, and the hidden panel clicked back into place, looking like nothing more than ordinary floor panels. Then he went into overdrive, racing to erase every trace of his guests. Drakvan scales scattered in the snow outside the door. Claw marks gouged into the metal near the entrance. Melted ice puddles with an unusual chemical signature. He worked with frantic speed, his heart hammering in his chest like a war drum. The rescue ship broke through the thinning storm clouds right on schedule. It was a standard medical transport, the kind humans used for emergency evacuations on frontier worlds. The vessel touched down 50 meters from Jake's homestead, kicking up a cloud of snow and ice. The boarding ramp lowered and Captain Maria Stone stepped out, followed by 3 crew members in cold weather gear. Jake. Maria called out, jogging toward him through the snow. They'd served together years ago before Jake had left the military and disappeared out here. We picked up your thermal alerts from orbit. Everything all right? You're running hot enough to cook food in there. Jake forced himself to look casual, like a man who just had a minor technical problem and not someone hiding 3 aliens in his basement. Heater malfunction. The temperature regulation system went haywire during the storm. Had to crank everything to maximum just to keep the pipes from freezing and bursting. It's under control now. Maria's sharp eyes scanned the homestead, taking in details the way good soldiers always did. Your power consumption is off the charts. You running some kind of operation out here we should know about? What, you think I'm secretly mining without a license? Jake laughed, making it sound natural. Look around, Maria. Does this look like a mining setup? I'm just trying not to freeze to death on this ice ball of a planet. She didn't laugh back. Instead, she pulled a handheld scanner from her belt and swept it across the area. Jake's pulse quickened. If she detected the biosigns from 3 Drakvan hiding below his feet, everything would fall apart. 50 feet beneath them in the sealed shelter, Kevin's body suddenly went into crisis. Jake couldn't see it happening, couldn't hear it, but somehow he knew. The juvenile was convulsing, his alien nervous system shutting down from the cold exposure. Victor would need to use the sonic stabilizer to prevent brain damage, but using that device would send out a distinctive frequency pattern that Maria's scanner would pick up instantly. Jake made a split-second decision. Actually, the malfunction isn't completely fixed. Let me show you. He led Maria and her team toward the furnace room, talking loudly to cover any sounds from below. Then, as if by accident, he bumped into a power coupling and triggered a massive overload. Sparks exploded from the junction box. Alarms screamed throughout the homestead. The electromagnetic surge flooded every scanner within 100 meters with white noise and interference, completely blinding their equipment. Jake, what the hell? Maria shouted over the noise, backing away from the shower of sparks. Told you it wasn't fixed. Jake yelled back, already moving to hit the emergency shutoff. The sparking stopped after 10 seconds, but the electromagnetic interference would linger for several minutes. Long enough for Victor to use the stabilizer and save Kevin's life while every scanner in the area showed nothing but static. Jake vented the smoke through the exterior doors, waving his hand dramatically. Sorry about that. Guess I'm not as good with repair work as I thought I was. Maria coughed, her eyes watering from the acrid smell. She gave him a long searching look that made Jake's skin crawl. You've been out here alone too long, Jake? You're starting to act strange. Probably true, Jake admitted, because agreeing seemed safer than denying. Her team finished checking his systems once their scanners reset. All clear, Captain, one of them reported. Just looks like normal equipment failure. Before they left, Maria pulled Jake aside, her voice dropping low. Listen, I need to tell you something. We've had reports of Drakvan ships in this sector. Not military, more like raiders or pirates. They've been hitting mining operations, attacking survey teams. If you see any of those scaled monsters out here, you call it in immediately. Don't try to be a hero. Jake kept his face neutral. Raiders, huh? What are they after? Who knows? Maybe they're slavers, maybe just thieves taking advantage of the peace treaty. Maria's expression hardened. But don't believe that propaganda about them being honorable warriors. These ones are criminals, Jake. Animals. You see them, you shoot first and ask questions never. Jake nodded slowly, even as her words twisted something in his gut. Got it? Stay safe. He watched their ship lift off and disappear into the gray sky, becoming just another dot in the distance. He stood outside for a moment, letting the freezing air clear his head and slow his racing heart. Then he went back inside and opened the shelter. Victor emerged first, still carrying Kevin. But this time the juvenile's eyes were open and focused. Alert. Alive. We had to use the stabilizer, Victor said quietly. Your distraction with the power surge saved his life. The electromagnetic interference masked our equipment signature. Good, Jake said, checking Kevin's vital signs on his handheld scanner. Everything looked stable now, even improving. But we've got a bigger problem than I thought. Your people suspect something? Victor asked. No. Worse than that. Jake met the Drakvan leader's eyes. Maria told me your people are operating in this sector. She called you raiders and pirates. Said you've been attacking human mining operations and survey teams. Rachel spoke from the shadows of the shelter entrance. We are not raiders. We are not criminals. We are searching. Searching for what? For our people, Victor said, his voice heavy with emotion Jake had never heard from a Drakvan before. There are hundreds of us stranded on cold worlds throughout this entire sector. Drakvan who discovered the weakness by accident like we did. Our government refuses to send rescue missions. They refuse to even acknowledge that the genetic flaw exists. So we come ourselves, a handful of ships crewed by deserters and rebels, risking execution for abandoning our posts. We search for our stranded kin and try to save them before the cold kills them. Jake felt something cold and heavy settle into his stomach. Your government is just abandoning them? Leaving them to die? Worse, Victor said. They are erasing the evidence. Every Drakvan who knows about the weakness becomes a liability, a threat to the illusion of Drakvan perfection and strength. He looked down at Kevin with an expression that transcended species. And now they have dispatched warships to finish what the cold began. To eliminate everyone who knows the truth. Kevin stirred in Victor's arms. The juvenile's eyes found Jake, and when he spoke, his voice was clear and his human words were flawless, without any accent at all. He must have spent years studying human broadcast. Thank you for saving my life. But you need to understand something. They're coming here. The Purge fleet. They're going to kill everyone who knows about our weakness. That includes you now. Jake stared at the 3 Drakvan standing in his underground shelter. Former enemies who'd killed his friends. Refugees fleeing their own government. And now, witnesses to a genocide that was about to land on his doorstep. How long do we have? He asked. 3 days, Victor said quietly. Maybe less if they push their engines. Jake ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit from his military days. 3 days to decide if he'd risk everything to save people who'd once tried to kill him. 3 days to figure out how one burned-out veteran living on the edge of nowhere could possibly stand against a fleet of warships. 3 days to either become a hero or die trying. He looked at Kevin's young, trusting eyes. At Victor's desperate hope that anyone would help them. At Rachel's quiet courage in the face of certain death. All right then, Jake said, his voice taking on that old command tone from his war days. If we've only got 3 days, then we'd better stop wasting time and get to work. Jake barely left his lab for the next 6 hours. It wasn't really a proper laboratory, just a storage room he'd converted years ago, filled with medical equipment he'd held onto from his military service. Most veterans sold off their surplus gear after mustering out, but Jake had kept his. Maybe some part of him had always known he'd need it again. He'd drawn blood samples from all three Drakven, running test after test on his aging analysis equipment. The machine hummed and beeped as it processed alien biology, spitting out data that Jake studied with increasing fascination and frustration. "This doesn't make any sense at all," he muttered, leaning closer to his display screen. The genetic sequences glowed in bright colors, spiraling patterns that told the story of what the Drakven really were. Victor stood behind him, his massive frame casting a shadow across the small workspace. The Drakven leader watched intently as Jake's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more data. "What do you mean? What are you seeing?" Jake pointed at the screen, tracing a section of the DNA strand with his finger. "Your thermal regulation system isn't actually broken. It's incomplete. There's a difference. I do not understand the distinction." "Look here," Jake said, highlighting a cluster of genes. "Your creators built you to survive extreme heat. And I mean extreme. The mechanisms are incredibly sophisticated. There are protein chains that protect your cells from heat damage, enzyme systems that regulate your internal temperature when exposed to fire or plasma. It's honestly beautiful work from a biological engineering standpoint. But the cold weather equivalent." He scrolled to another section. "It's just not there. Not damaged or mutated. Never installed in the first place." Rachel had been resting against the doorframe, but now she moved closer. "Like a deliberate omission?" "Exactly like that," Jake confirmed. "It's like building a spaceship that has engines to go forward but no reverse thrusters. Or a vehicle that can only make left turns. Your creators gave you one half of a complete temperature regulation system and just stopped." "Can it be repaired?" Rachel asked. Her voice was stronger now, recovering from the cold exposure, but Jake could hear the desperate hope underneath the words. Jake ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Maybe. I don't know. The problem is I'm not a geneticist. I'm a combat medic. I know how to keep soldiers alive in bad situations, how to treat injuries and stabilize people for transport. But rewriting alien genetics." He gestured at his equipment. "Even if I had the knowledge to do that, I definitely don't have the kind of sophisticated lab equipment you'd need. What I've got here is basic field medical gear, not a genetic engineering facility." Kevin had been quiet since they'd come upstairs from the shelter. The young Drakven was moving around now, his strength returning hour by hour. He approached the console where Jake and Victor stood, his golden eyes studying the complex data displayed on the screen with an intelligence that surprised Jake. "What about adding instead of rewriting?" Kevin asked suddenly. Jake glanced at the juvenile. "Adding what?" "The proteins you mentioned. The ones that protect against cold. Could you give those to us somehow?" Jake started to shake his head. "That's not really how biology works, Kevin. You can't just inject random proteins into someone and expect them to integrate with—" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went distant as his mind raced through possibilities. "Wait. Actually, there are some proteins that do work that way. Some temporary adaptive proteins that the body can use without needing genetic reprogramming." He quickly pulled up a different screen, this one showing human genetic data. His own profile, actually, scanned years ago during his military physical exams. Humans evolved cold weather adaptations over thousands of years. We're adaptable because we spread to so many different environments. And we have this specific protein cluster that activates when we're exposed to extreme cold. It helps our cells maintain their structural integrity even when temperatures drop. Keeps our blood flowing properly, prevents ice crystal formation in our tissues. It's not a permanent change, it only lasts for a few weeks at most, but while it's active, it works incredibly well. Could it work for us? Victor asked, leaning in to study the human genetic sequence. "You're not human," Jake pointed out. "Your biology is different in fundamental ways." Rachel moved to the other side of the console. "But not that different, correct? We both have iron-based blood that carries oxygen. We're both carbon-based life forms. Our cells operate on similar principles. And you said our temperature ranges for basic survival overlap significantly." Jake was already running simulations on his medical computer, the old machine processing faster than he'd seen it work in years. The results appeared on screen, probability calculations and compatibility analyses. He studied them carefully, his medical training warring with the sheer audacity of what he was considering. "It might work," he said slowly. "The human cold weather proteins would need to bond with your existing temperature regulation system. They'd essentially complete the circuit your creators left open. But there's significant risk. Your immune system might recognize them as foreign invaders and trigger a massive rejection response. That could shut down your major organs in minutes. Or the proteins might integrate but interact badly with your heat resistance mechanisms, creating a feedback loop that cooks you from the inside out. And if we do nothing? Victor asked quietly. If we take no risks at all? Then you die anyway, Jake admitted. Either from the cold or from your own purge fleet when they arrive in less than 3 days. Jake looked at the 3 Drakvin standing in his cramped laboratory. Victor, the warrior leader carrying the weight of his people's survival. Rachel, the soldier who'd found courage in the face of abandonment. And Kevin, the young one who'd already come so close to death. They were waiting for him to make a decision, trusting a human they barely knew to gamble with their lives. This is completely experimental, Jake said, making sure they understood. I've never done anything like this before. Nobody has. I'd be guessing based on my combat medical training and pure desperation. The chances of something going wrong are significant. Victor's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell on a Drakvin face. Then we are in very good hands, Jake Moss. All soldiers understand making desperate decisions with incomplete information. It is what we do. Jake felt a laugh escape despite the tension. I guess you're right about that. He began pulling up supply lists, calculating what he'd need to synthesize the human proteins in sufficient quantities for 3 Drakvin. I'll need to extract and replicate the cold weather protein clusters from human blood samples. The process will take several hours. And we'll need multiple donors to generate enough material. Where will you find human donors out here? Rachel asked. Your nearest neighbor is hundreds of kilometers away. Jake was already reaching for his old military communicator, the encrypted device he'd kept charged all these years even though he rarely used it. I'm going to call in some favors. People who served with me, who understand what it means when someone asks for help. He scrolled through his contact list, names he hadn't spoken to in months or years. The Frost Hounds, his old unit from the Ice Moon Hell-4. Veterans scattered across this entire sector of space, all trying to move past the war in their own ways. Jake started typing a message, keeping it simple and direct. The kind of message soldiers understood. Need help. Medical emergency. Require cold weather protein donations. We'll explain everything when you arrive. Coordinates attached. Time sensitive. He hit send and waited. The responses came faster than he'd dared hope. Grant here. Loading my ship now. Be there in 8 hours. Amy responding. Bringing medical supplies. ETA 10 hours. This is Derek. Count me in. Launching within the hour. Patricia. On my way. Whatever you need. One by one his old unit answered the call. They didn't demand explanations. They didn't ask questions about why a retired medic living alone needed emergency protein donations. They just came because that's what the Frosthounds did. When one of their own called for help, you dropped everything and answered. Your people are really coming? Victor asked, listening to the responses ping in one after another. Just like that? Just on your word. 17 confirmed so far, Jake said, watching his screen fill with incoming messages. They'll be here by tomorrow morning. Rachel's voice carried disbelief. They are coming to help Drakvin? After what we did to humanity during the war. Jake turned to face them, and his expression was serious but not hard. They're coming because it's the right thing to do. Every single one of them knows what it feels like to be abandoned by the people who should protect you. They know what it means to be written off as expendable. They won't let that happen to others if they can prevent it, even if those others used to be enemies. Kevin watched Jake with those intelligent young eyes. You trust these humans not to report us to your government? Not to turn us over to your authorities? I trust them with my life, Jake said simply. And now I'm trusting them with yours too. The first ship appeared in Frosthome's gray sky 8 hours later. Grant Wilson, former combat medic and one of Jake's closest friends during the war, landed his small transport outside the homestead. He walked in carrying 3 portable medical lab units, saw the Drakvin, and barely even blinked. So, Grant said casually, setting down his equipment. We're doing experimental alien medicine now? Cool. Things were getting boring anyway. Jake felt something tight in his chest loosen just a little. This might actually work. Over the next 36 hours, Jake's isolated homestead transformed into something he'd never imagined it could be. A fortress. A field hospital. A last stand against genocide. Grant worked alongside 2 other veterans, welding salvaged armor plating to the exterior walls. The sound of plasma torches filled the freezing air as they reinforced every weak point they could find. Amy positioned defensive turrets at strategic points around the compound, weapons she'd somehow managed to keep from her military days. Patricia converted Jake's entire living quarters into a proper medical bay, setting up equipment to treat casualties, whether human or Drakvan. The work went on day and night, everyone moving with the kind of focused intensity that only comes when you know a battle is coming and time is running out. 7 Drakvan warships arrived first, dropping through Frosthome's gray atmosphere like falling stars. They landed in formation around Jake's compound, their massive hulls still bearing the insignia of the Drakvan military. But these ships were commanded by deserters now, rebels who'd abandoned their posts to save their own people from a government that had marked them for death. The lead ship's captain introduced himself with a name that sounded like David when translated into human speech. He brought 73 Drakvan warriors with him, all of them volunteers who'd risked execution for treason to be here. Derek, one of Jake's old squad mates, did a quick count of their forces. 73 Drakvan on our side, plus 17 humans. We're facing down 15 Purge Fleet warships. Jake, the math on this really isn't looking good. Jake watched more ships descending through the clouds. Yeah, I know. Math was never my strong subject anyway. More Drakvan kept arriving throughout the day and into the night. Not warriors this time but refugees. Stranded survivors from cold worlds scattered across the entire sector. They came in damaged shuttles and makeshift transports, some of them barely holding together. Over 300 Drakvan in total, all of them desperate for the treatment that would save their lives. Jake, Patricia, and Amy worked around the clock, administering the Frost Protocol injection to every Drakvan who needed it. They'd refined the process, made it faster and more reliable. Each injection took only minutes now. Draw blood from a human donor, synthesize the cold weather proteins, modify them slightly to be compatible with Drakvan biology, inject and monitor. Each successful treatment felt like a small victory. Each Drakvan who walked outside into the blizzard and survived, who felt warmth spread through their body for the first time in weeks or months, was living proof that the treatment actually worked. That the supposed genetic weakness their government wanted to hide could be overcome. Kevin was helping now too, translating between languages and calming frightened refugees who'd never met a human before. The young Drakvan had become a bridge between two species that had spent 5 years trying to kill each other. Then the Purge fleet arrived. 15 massive warships tore through slipspace and emerged in Frosthome's orbit. They were proper military vessels, not the converted transports and aging ships that defended the compound below. Their weapons arrays could level cities. Their armor could withstand sustained bombardment. And they'd come here to eliminate everyone who knew the truth about Drakvan biology. The ships descended through the atmosphere in attack formation, blotting out what little sunlight filtered through Frosthome's perpetual clouds. Their hulls gleamed with fresh paint and polished metal. These were ships maintained by the full resources of the Drakvan government, crewed by loyal soldiers who believed they were protecting their species' honor. The flagship's communication array activated, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. The voice that came through was cold and absolutely certain of its righteousness. This is War Commander Kyle of the Burning Claw. I address all traitors and defectors who have abandoned their duty. You will be executed for treason. I address all humans who have harbored genetic refuse and spread lies about our people. You will be exterminated for your interference. This is the consequence of showing mercy to the weak. This is the price of defying your government's will. Jake was standing in the command center they'd set up in his former workshop. He looked at Amy, who was monitoring their communications equipment. Can you hack into their military network? Amy's fingers were already moving across her keyboard, running through encryption-breaking protocols she'd learned during the war. Probably. Give me 2 minutes. Why, what are you planning? Because we're going to tell every single Drakvan in this sector exactly what their government has been doing, Jake said. We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth. Amy worked in focused silence, lines of code scrolling across her screens faster than Jake could follow. Finally she looked up. Okay, you're in. You're broadcasting live on every Drakvan military channel within 3 light years. Whatever you want to say, make it count. You won't get a second chance. Jake activated the microphone, taking a deep breath before he spoke. His voice would be heard on hundreds of Drakvan ships, by thousands of soldiers who'd been told that everything their government did was for the greater good. This is Jake Moss. I'm a human veteran of the Kelvin War. I'm speaking directly to every Drakvan who can hear my voice right now. Your government has been lying to you about something fundamental. There's a genetic flaw built into your species, a deliberate vulnerability to cold that was installed by your creators as a control mechanism. Instead of acknowledging this and fixing it, your leaders have chosen to murder anyone who discovers the truth. They're erasing the evidence by killing their own people. He signaled to Kevin, who started playing the footage they'd recorded. Video of himself before the treatment, scales black with cold exposure, barely able to move. Then after the treatment, walking through a blizzard as if the freezing temperatures didn't exist. Rachel and Victor doing the same, thriving in conditions that should have killed them within minutes. "We found a cure," Jake continued. "It's simple, it's effective, and it's available right now. It uses human cold weather proteins to complete the temperature regulation system your creators left deliberately incomplete. We're giving it away for free to any Drakvan who needs it. But your Purge fleet wants to destroy this cure because it exposes the lies your government has been telling for generations. Every Drakvan currently dying on cold worlds across this sector could be saved. Instead they're being abandoned, erased, forgotten, murdered by their own leaders." The communication channels fell completely silent. Jake could imagine thousands of Drakvan warriors on hundreds of ships, processing what they just heard. Seeing the evidence with their own eyes. Realizing that their government had been willing to commit genocide to hide a weakness. Then 6 warships broke formation from the Purge fleet. Their transponders switched from military to independent status as they turned and moved to join the defenders surrounding Jake's compound. 6 ships' worth of crews had just committed treason based on 2 minutes of video footage and one human veteran's words. "I promise to pay when I grow up." Poor alien girl asks Mech for milk. What he does is surprising.